Ben had worked hard since graduating college, scrimping and saving every penny. He rented a small apartment while many of his friends bought fancy cars or took expensive vacations. Ben had a different dream, a house. A place to call his own, with a yard for his future dog and enough space to finally set up his drum kit. Finally, after years of dedication, he did it. He found a cozy little house in the Willow Creek Estates. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect for him, with a small garden and a community pool. To celebrate, he bought himself a brand new, shiny red sports car. It was a splurge, but he deserved it. He parked it proudly in his driveway, the sun glinting off its polished surface. He spent the next few weeks settling in, meeting his neighbors, and generally enjoying the perks of homeownership. Willow Creek Estates seemed like a friendly, quiet place. Most people were welcoming. Then there was Karen. Karen was the president of the HOA, the Homeowners Association. She was a woman of a certain age, with a severe haircut and an even more severe demeanor. Karen took her role very seriously, perhaps a little too seriously. She was always on the lookout for rule infractions, from overgrown lawns to improperly placed trash cans. She was a stickler. Ben had met her briefly at the welcome picnic. She'd given him a list of HOA regulations, highlighting several in bold red marker. Ben got the feeling she didn't quite approve of him. Maybe it was his age, or maybe it was the bright red sports car that seemed a little out of place amongst the sensible sedans and minivans. Little did Ben know, Karen already saw him as a threat to the established order of Willow Creek Estates. She liked things just so, and a young bachelor with a flashy car didn't fit into her vision. The stage was set. The players were in place. The conflict was brewing. The following Saturday, Ben decided to give his car a thorough wash. He took pride in keeping it spotless. He gathered his bucket, soap, and sponge, and started to work. As he rinsed the soap away, he stepped back to admire his handiwork. The red paint gleamed under the sunlight. He grabbed his polishing cloth and began to buff the hood, humming along to the music playing softly on his phone. He wanted everyone to see it and be amazed. That's when he saw it. A long, jagged scratch ran down the entire side of the car, from the front fender to the rear quarter panel. It was deep, ugly, and impossible to miss. Ben's heart sank. He ran his fingers over the scratch, feeling the rough edges of the gouged paint. "No," he whispered, disbelief washing over him. "This can't be happening." He circled the car, looking for other damage. And then he saw the egg. Dried, cracked egg yolk was splattered across the windshield and hood. It had clearly been there for a while, baked on by the sun. Rage began to bubble up inside him. Who would do something like this? He scanned the street, looking for any sign of the culprit. Nothing. Just the quiet, peaceful suburban street he thought he knew. His mind immediately went to Karen. She was the only one who had seemed openly hostile towards him. Could she have done this? It seemed unbelievable, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow involved. He remembered her stern face, the way she had scrutinized his car at the picnic. He remembered the list of HOA regulations, the ones she had highlighted with such zeal. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He couldn't jump to conclusions. He needed evidence. But deep down, he knew. Karen was the most likely suspect. His brand new car, once a symbol of his hard work and success, was now a canvas of spite. The peace of Willow Creek Estates had been shattered. Karen prided herself on maintaining order in Willow Creek Estates. To her, it wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a carefully curated community, a haven of perfectly manicured lawns and strictly enforced regulations. She saw herself as its guardian, protecting it from anything that might disrupt its delicate balance. Her house was a testament to her meticulous nature. Every blade of grass was precisely trimmed, every flower in its designated place. The windows sparkled, and the paint was always fresh. Inside, everything was spotless and organized, a reflection of her own rigid personality. She had been HOA president for 5 years, and in that time, she had implemented numerous rules and regulations, all in the name of preserving property values and maintaining the community's aesthetic appeal. Some residents appreciated her dedication, while others found her overbearing and intrusive. Karen believed in rules. Rules were what kept society civil. Rules were what separated Willow Creek Estates from the chaos of the outside world. And she, Karen, was there to enforce them. When Ben moved in with his bright red sports car and youthful exuberance, Karen saw him as a threat to her carefully constructed order. He was too loud, too flashy, too different. He didn't seem to understand the importance of conformity, the need to blend in. She'd watched him washing the car, admiring his handiwork. It was ostentatious, showy. She pursed her lips. It was exactly the kind of thing that brought down property values. And those awful drums that he played at all hours of the night. She would never admit to keying the car or throwing eggs. That sort of behavior was beneath her, but in her mind, Ben had brought it on himself. He had flaunted his success, disrupted the peace, and challenged her authority. He was a disruption, plain and simple, and disruptions needed to be dealt with. She smiled thinly. Perhaps this little incident would teach him a lesson. Perhaps it would encourage him to be a little more respectful of the rules. After all, she was only looking out for the best interests of the community. Or so she told herself. The next morning, Ben woke up with a knot of anger already forming in his stomach. He replayed the scene from the previous day in his mind, the scratch, the egg, the feeling of violation. He knew he couldn't let it go. He threw on some clothes and stormed outside, determined to confront Karen. He imagined marching up to her perfectly manicured lawn, demanding answers, and giving her a piece of his mind. The thought felt satisfying, but he knew it wouldn't solve anything. As he approached his car, the sight of the damage reignited his fury. The red paint, once so vibrant, now seemed dull and mocking. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. He knew that confronting Karen without proof would only make him look like the aggressor. He needed a plan. He needed evidence. He spent the morning cleaning up the mess, scrubbing the dried egg off the windshield and washing away the remnants of the attack. Each swipe of the sponge only fueled his anger. As he worked, he couldn't shake the image of Karen's smug face. He pictured her peering out her window, watching him clean up the mess, reveling in his misfortune. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that she was responsible. No one else in the neighborhood had given him any reason to suspect them. Only Karen, with her rigid rules and disapproving glances, seemed capable of such a petty act of spite. His initial impulse was to retaliate, to key her car, or maybe even egg her house. But he knew that would only escalate the situation and make him no better than her. He needed to find a way to get justice without stooping to her level. He decided to start with the HOA records. He remembered Karen mentioning that all members had access to them. Maybe, just maybe, there was something in there that could shed some light on her activities. It was a long shot, but he had nothing to lose. He would play her game, but he would play it smart. He would use her own rules against her. He would uncover the truth, and he would expose her for who she really was. The anger hadn't dissipated, but it had become focused, channeled into a determination to seek justice. Later that afternoon, as Ben was brooding in his living room, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, there was a knock on the door. He opened it to find Maria, his next-door neighbor, standing on his porch with a sympathetic smile. Maria was a warm, friendly woman in her late 50s. She had lived in Willow Creek Estates for over 20 years and knew everyone in the neighborhood. She had welcomed Ben with open arms when he moved in, offering him cookies and advice about local services. "I saw what happened to your car, Ben," she said, her voice filled with concern. "I'm so sorry. That's just awful." Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, Maria. I'm furious. I think I know who did it, too. He hesitated, then confided in her about his suspicions regarding Karen. Maria listened patiently, her expression growing more serious as he spoke. Karen can be difficult, she admitted. She takes the HOA very seriously. But I can't believe she would do something like that. I don't know who else it could be, Ben said, his voice laced with frustration. I was thinking about going over there and giving her a piece of my mind. Maria gently placed a hand on his arm. I understand how you feel, Ben, but I don't think that's the best approach. Confronting her directly will only make things worse. It'll be your word against hers, and she's very good at playing the victim. So, what am I supposed to do? Ben asked, feeling defeated. Just let her get away with it. Of course not, Maria said firmly. But you need to be smart about it. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you lose your cool. Instead, try to find some evidence. She paused, tapping her chin thoughtfully. You know, all HOA members have access to the association's financial records. Maybe there's something in there that could help you. Ben's eyes widened. You think so? It's worth a shot, Maria said. Karen controls everything in this neighborhood. Who knows what she's been up to? It might take some digging, but you might find something that could help you prove your case. That's a great idea, Maria, Ben said, feeling a glimmer of hope. I'll start looking into it right away. Maria smiled. That's the spirit, Ben. Don't let her get you down. Just remember, the truth always comes out in the end. The HOA records were a mess. Boxes upon boxes of paperwork filled with receipts, invoices, meeting minutes, and budget reports dating back several years. Ben had managed to get access to them from a reluctant HOA secretary, who clearly wasn't thrilled about his request. He set up a makeshift office in his spare bedroom, surrounded by stacks of documents. He started with the most recent records and worked his way backward, meticulously examining each page. The first few hours were frustrating. Most of the documents were mundane and boring, invoices for landscaping services, pool maintenance, and general repairs. He struggled to stay focused, his eyes glazing over from the sheer volume of information. He made a spreadsheet on his laptop to track his findings, categorizing expenses and noting any irregularities. He felt like a detective, sifting through clues in search of a hidden truth. As the days wore on, Ben became increasingly overwhelmed. The paperwork seemed endless, and he found himself losing track of important details. The language was dense and technical, filled with accounting jargon he didn't understand. He started to question his decision. Maybe Maria was wrong. Maybe there was nothing to find in these records. Maybe he was just wasting his time. The frustration mounted. He missed spending time on his drums, working in his garden, and just relaxing in his new home. Instead, he was stuck in this stuffy room, poring over dusty documents, his head swimming with numbers and legal terms. He took breaks to clear his head, going for walks around the neighborhood and grabbing coffee at the local cafe. But even then, his mind was consumed by the HOA records. He couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was hiding something, and he was determined to find it. Sleep became a luxury. He stayed up late into the night, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for justice. The spare bedroom, once a symbol of his future, had become a prison of paperwork, a constant reminder of the wrong that had been done to him. Despite the challenges, Ben refused to give up. He knew that Karen was counting on him to quit, to become discouraged and walk away. But he wouldn't let her win. He would keep digging, keep searching, until he found the evidence he needed to expose her. The fight had just begun. After what felt like an eternity, Ben finally stumbled upon something that caught his eye. He was reviewing invoices from the past year when he noticed a series of payments to a contractor named Vinny's Superior Services. The amounts were significant, ranging from a few $100s to several thousand, and they appeared frequently throughout the year. What struck Ben as odd was the lack of detail on the invoices. They simply stated, general maintenance or property improvement, with no specific description of the work performed. He cross-referenced the invoices with the meeting minutes, hoping to find some explanation for these expenses. But there was nothing. No mention of Vinny's superior services, no discussion of the projects he supposedly completed, no record of any bids or proposals. Ben's heart started to race. This felt like a breakthrough. The lack of transparency surrounding these payments was highly suspicious. It was as if Karen was deliberately trying to conceal something. He dug deeper, searching for any other references to Vinny in the HOA records. He found a few more invoices from previous years, but the pattern was the same, vague descriptions and no supporting documentation. He decided to do a quick online search for Vinny's superior services. The results were underwhelming. There was no website, no social media presence, no reviews. The only thing he found was a listing on a generic business directory with no contact information. The more he investigated, the more convinced he became that something shady was going on. These payments to Vinny were a red flag, a glaring anomaly in the otherwise mundane world of HOA finances. He printed out all the invoices related to Vinny's superior services and added them to his growing pile of evidence. He knew he was onto something big, something that could potentially expose Karen's true colors. The frustration and exhaustion he had been feeling began to dissipate, replaced by a surge of excitement. He had found a lead, a thread he could pull to unravel Karen's web of deceit. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in days, Ben felt like he was finally making progress. The truth was out there, and he was determined to find it. Ben, energized by his discovery, immediately called Maria. "I found something," he exclaimed, his voice buzzing with excitement. Suspicious payments to a contractor named Vinny. No details, no documentation, nothing. Maria listened intently, asking clarifying questions. "Vinny's superior services, huh? That doesn't ring a bell. Let me see what I can find out." The next day, Maria came over with a knowing look on her face. "I did some digging," she said, "and I think I found our Vinny." She explained that she had discreetly asked around the neighborhood, mentioning the name Vinny and contractor in casual conversations. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had remembered Karen mentioning a cousin who did odd jobs. Mrs. Henderson said Karen's cousin is named Vincent Mancini, but everyone calls him Vinny, Maria explained. "He's supposedly a contractor, but, well, let's just say his reputation isn't the best." Maria had also done some online research, uncovering a few complaints about Vinny Mancini's work. Apparently, he had a habit of starting projects and then disappearing, leaving homeowners with unfinished work and shoddy repairs. There were even rumors of him cutting corners and using substandard materials. "So, let me get this straight," Ben said, piecing it all together. "Karen is funneling HOA money to her cousin, who's a shady contractor with a questionable reputation." Maria nodded grimly. "That's what it looks like. It's a clear conflict of interest, and it could be considered embezzlement." Ben felt a surge of righteous anger. Karen wasn't just a strict HOA president, she was a crook, using her position to enrich herself and her family. "We need to expose her," Ben said, his voice firm. "We can't let her get away with this." "I agree," Maria said. "But we need to be careful. Karen is a powerful woman in this community. We need to have all our ducks in a row before we confront her." They spent the rest of the day strategizing, discussing how to present their findings to the other HOA members. They knew they needed to be calm, rational, and persuasive. They couldn't afford to let their emotions cloud their judgment. The stakes were too high. They were fighting for the future of Willow Creek Estates, and they were determined to win. The key, Maria emphasized, was to avoid making direct accusations. "We can't go in there guns blazing, Ben," she cautioned. "That will just make Karen defensive, and she'll shut down. We need to plant the seed of doubt in people's minds and let them draw their own conclusions." They decided to focus on the lack of transparency surrounding the payments to Vinny's superior services. They would frame it as a concern for the proper management of HOA funds, rather than a personal attack on Karen. "We'll start by asking questions," Maria suggested. "Simple, innocent questions. Like, can we get more details about the work Vinny's superior services has been doing, and why weren't these projects discussed at previous meetings?" Ben practiced his delivery, trying to sound neutral and concerned, rather than angry and accusatory. He knew it would be difficult, but he understood the importance of maintaining a calm and collected demeanor. They also discussed the importance of having their facts straight. They needed to be prepared to answer any questions that might arise and to back up their claims with solid evidence. "We'll bring copies of the invoices and the meeting minutes," Ben said. "We can show everyone the lack of documentation and the absence of any discussion about these expenses." They also considered the possibility that Karen might try to deflect blame or offer a plausible explanation for the payments. They needed to be prepared for any eventuality. She might say that Vinny's work was essential for maintaining property values, Maria said. Or that she was simply trying to support a local business. "We'll need to be ready to counter those arguments," Ben replied. "We can point out the lack of competitive bidding and the fact that Vinny's services aren't even listed in the HOA budget." They rehearsed their presentation multiple times, refining their arguments and anticipating Karen's responses. They wanted to be as prepared as possible, to minimize the risk of making a mistake. "Remember, Ben," Maria said, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the entire community. We need to do this right." As the day of the HOA meeting approached, Ben felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial, that they could determine the future of Willow Creek Estates. He was ready to face Karen, to expose her corruption, and to bring justice to his community. He hoped that his car would be the last victim. The community center was packed. The monthly HOA meeting was always well attended, but tonight, there was an extra buzz in the air. Ben and Maria sat near the back, watching as their neighbors filed in, exchanging greetings and settling into their seats. Karen, as always, was at the head of the table, presiding over the meeting with an air of authority. She looked confident and composed, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. The meeting began with the usual formalities. Karen quickly rattled through the agenda, approving routine expenses and committee reports with practiced ease. She seemed eager to get through the meeting as quickly as possible, clearly not expecting any challenges. She breezed through the landscaping report, the pool maintenance update, and the approval of new holiday decorations. No one raised any objections. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Ben could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at Maria, who gave him a reassuring nod. It was almost time. Karen moved on to the financial report, summarizing the HOA's income and expenses for the past month. She highlighted the association's strong financial position and praised her own leadership for maintaining a balanced budget. "As you can see," she said, her voice smooth and confident, "we are in excellent financial shape. Thanks to careful management and responsible spending, we have plenty of reserves to cover any unexpected expenses." Ben took a deep breath. This was his chance. He raised his hand, waiting for Karen to acknowledge him. "Yes, Ben," Karen said, her tone slightly impatient. "Do you have a question?" "Yes, I do," Ben said, his voice calm but firm. "I was reviewing the financial records, and I noticed a few payments to a contractor named Vinny's Superior Services. I was wondering if we could get some more details about the work they've been doing." Karen's smile faltered slightly. For the first time that evening, she seemed a little less sure of herself. The game had begun. Ben continued, carefully choosing his words. "I'm not questioning the validity of these expenses, but I think it's important for us to have a clear understanding of how our HOA funds are being used. The invoices I saw were rather vague, simply stating general maintenance or property improvement." He paused, looking around the room to gauge the reactions of his neighbors. Several people were nodding in agreement. I think it would benefit everyone if we had more detailed descriptions of the work performed, he continued. Perhaps even photos or before and after shots. This would not only provide greater transparency but also help us ensure that we're getting the best value for our money. Maria chimed in, her voice calm and supportive. I agree with Ben. As homeowners, we all have a right to know how our money is being spent. More transparency would build trust and confidence in the HOA's management. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I appreciate your concerns, she said, her voice tight. But I assure you, everything is above board. Vinny's Superior Services has been doing excellent work for the community for many years. I'm not doubting the quality of their work, Ben replied, but I think it's reasonable to ask for more details. Can you tell us specifically what projects Vinny's Superior Services has completed in the past year? Karen hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. Well, they've done a variety of things, she stammered. General maintenance, repairs, landscaping, you know, the usual stuff. But can you provide specific examples? Ben pressed, his voice still calm but unwavering. Which properties did they work on? What kind of repairs did they make? What specific landscaping services did they provide? Karen's face was starting to flush. She clearly wasn't prepared to answer these questions. The other HOA members were watching intently, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. Ben had successfully planted the seed of doubt. Now, it was just a matter of waiting to see if it would grow. The room felt thick with tension. The only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning. All eyes were on Karen, waiting for her response. Karen's response was sharp. I don't appreciate the implication that I'm not being transparent, she snapped, her voice rising in volume. I've been the president of this HOA for 5 years, and I've always acted in the best interests of this community. She tried to regain control of the meeting. These are just routine expenses, she continued, waving her hand dismissively. We don't need to waste time nitpicking every single invoice. We have more important matters to discuss. But the other HOA members weren't buying it. Several people started murmuring amongst themselves, their faces etched with concern. I think Ben has a valid point, Mr. Johnson, a retired accountant, spoke up. We should have more detailed information about these expenses. It's our money, after all. Yeah, Mrs. Davis, a young mother, agreed. I'd like to know where my HOA fees are going. Karen's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. She could feel the tide turning against her. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, she said, her voice laced with frustration. Vinny's Superior Services is a reliable contractor, and their prices are reasonable. I don't see what the problem is. The problem, Karen, Ben said calmly, is that we don't have any evidence to support that claim. We don't have any bids, any proposals, any documentation to show that Vinny's Superior Services is the best choice for our community. He paused, letting his words sink in. And that's not transparency, Karen. That's the opposite of transparency. Karen's face was now bright red. She was clearly losing her cool. I resent that accusation, she retorted, her voice trembling with anger. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm simply trying to run this HOA efficiently and effectively. Then why are you so resistant to providing more information? Ben asked, his voice unwavering. What are you trying to hide? The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was waiting for Karen's response, wondering if she would finally crack under the pressure. The air conditioning now sounded like a freight train. Ben took a moment, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. Then, he reached into his bag and pulled out a few printed documents. He distributed them to the HOA members. I did some research, he said, his voice calm and steady. I wanted to learn more about Vinny's Superior Services. What I discovered is concerning. He paused, letting the other members read the documents. They contained information about Vincent Mancini, also known as Vinny, and his less-than-stellar reputation as a contractor. But the most damning piece of evidence was a family tree, showing the relationship between Vincent Mancini and Karen. "As you can see," Ben said, pointing to the family tree, "Vincent Mancini, the owner of Vinny's Superior Services, is Karen's cousin." A collective gasp swept through the room. The murmuring grew louder, more agitated. People started pointing at Karen, their faces filled with disbelief and anger. "Is this true, Karen?" Mr. Johnson asked, his voice incredulous. "Is Vinny your cousin?" Karen's face was ashen. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "This is a clear conflict of interest," Ben continued, his voice ringing with conviction. "Karen has been using her position as HOA president to funnel money to her family member, without any transparency or accountability." He held up the invoices, highlighting the vague descriptions and the lack of supporting documentation. "These payments to Vinny's Superior Services are not just routine expenses," he said. "They are a deliberate attempt to defraud the HOA and enrich Karen's family." The other HOA members were furious. They felt betrayed and violated. They had trusted Karen to manage their money responsibly, and she had abused that trust for her own personal gain. "This is unacceptable," Mrs. Davis exclaimed, her voice trembling with rage. "We need to do something about this." The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Karen, once the undisputed leader of Willow Creek Estates, was now facing a full-blown rebellion. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. The game was over. "This is outrageous," Mr. Johnson exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. "We demand an explanation, Karen. How could you do this to us? We trusted you." Mrs. Davis cried, her voice filled with anger. "You've been stealing from us, right under our noses." Other homeowners joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage. They demanded to know how much money Karen had funneled to her cousin, what projects Vinny's Superior Services had actually completed, and why she had kept this information hidden from them. "We want answers, Karen," someone shouted from the back of the room. "And we want them now." Karen, still ashen-faced, tried to regain control of the meeting. "Please, everyone, calm down," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "There's a simple explanation for all of this." But no one was listening. The other HOA members were too angry, too hurt, to hear what she had to say. They felt betrayed and violated, and they wanted justice. "We don't want your excuses, Karen," Mr. Johnson shouted. "We want the truth. Tell us what you've been doing with our money," Mrs. Davis demanded. "Tell us how much you've stolen from us." The pressure was mounting on Karen. She could feel the weight of their anger, the intensity of their disappointment. She knew that she couldn't talk her way out of this. The evidence was too damning, the accusations too serious. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely audible above the din, "It's not what you think." But her words were drowned out by the chorus of angry voices. The other HOA members were no longer willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. They had seen the evidence, they had heard the accusations, and they had made up their minds. "We want a full audit of the HOA finances," someone shouted. "And we want Karen to resign," another voice added. The meeting had descended into chaos. Karen, once the undisputed leader of Willow Creek Estates, was now facing a full-scale revolt. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. The truth had come out, and there was no escaping the consequences. Karen, desperate to salvage her reputation, tried to deflect blame and gaslight the other members. "You're all overreacting," she insisted, her voice trembling but firm. "This is just a misunderstanding. Vinny is a hard-working man, and he deserves to be compensated for his services." She attempted to minimize her relationship with Vinny. "He's just a distant cousin," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I hardly ever see him." She tried to convince the other members that they were being unreasonable, that they were letting their emotions cloud their judgment. "You're all being manipulated by Ben," she said, pointing an accusing finger at him. "He's just trying to cause trouble." She even tried to portray herself as the victim, claiming that she was being unfairly targeted and that her years of service to the community were being disregarded. "After everything I've done for you," she said, her voice laced with self-pity, "this is how you repay me?" But her attempts to deflect blame and gaslight the other members were futile. Her credibility was shattered. The evidence against her was too strong, the accusations too serious. The other HOA members were no longer willing to believe her lies. They had seen the truth, and they were not going to let her manipulate them any longer. "We're not stupid, Karen," Mr. Johnson said, his voice filled with disgust. "We know what you've been doing. You've betrayed our trust," Mrs. Davis added. "And we're not going to let you get away with it." Karen's carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. She had lost the support of the community, and she had no one to blame but herself. She slumped back in her chair, defeated and humiliated. She knew that the game was over, that there was no way to salvage her reputation or retain her position as HOA president. The truth had come out, and there was no escaping the consequences. The once proud and powerful Karen was reduced to a broken and disgraced figure. Mr. Johnson, still visibly angry, stood up and addressed the room. "I move that we conduct a full and independent audit of the HOA finances, going back at least 3 years, he said, his voice ringing with authority. "We need to know exactly how much money has been misspent and where it has gone." Mrs. Davis immediately seconded the motion. "I second that," she exclaimed. "We need to get to the bottom of this." Karen, slumped in her chair, offered no resistance. She knew that she was powerless to stop the inevitable. The other HOA members voted overwhelmingly in favor of the motion. The vote was unanimous, with the exception of Karen, who abstained. The decision was made. A full audit of the HOA finances would be conducted, and Karen's actions would be thoroughly investigated. The truth would finally come out, and she would be held accountable for her actions. The meeting adjourned shortly thereafter, leaving Karen alone and isolated in the community center. She had lost everything, her reputation, her power, and the trust of her neighbors. Ben and Maria exchanged a relieved glance. They had achieved their goal. They had exposed Karen's corruption and set in motion the process of bringing her to justice. As they left the community center, they were greeted by a chorus of thanks and congratulations from their neighbors. They had become heroes in Willow Creek Estates, standing up for what was right and fighting for the good of the community. The road ahead would not be easy. The audit would be a long and arduous process, and there would likely be legal battles to fight. But Ben and Maria were confident that they could overcome any challenges, as long as they remained united and determined. The fight for justice had just begun, and they were ready to see it through to the end. The first victory was sweet. The knowledge that the community was behind them made anything possible. The audit took several days, with a team of independent accountants meticulously reviewing every transaction and expense. The results were even more damning than Ben and Maria had anticipated. The audit revealed a significant misappropriation of funds by Karen and Vinny. Over the past 3 years, Karen had funneled tens of thousands of dollars to Vinny's superior services for work that was either never performed or grossly overcharged. The auditors uncovered numerous instances of fraudulent invoices, forged signatures, and unauthorized payments. They also found evidence that Karen had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, such as lavish dinners, expensive vacations, and designer clothing. The report was presented to the HOA board, who were shocked and appalled by the extent of Karen's corruption. They immediately voted to turn the evidence over to the authorities and to pursue legal action against Karen and Vinny. The news of the audit results spread quickly throughout Willow Creek Estates, spreading like wildfire. Neighbors who had once admired and respected Karen now viewed her with disdain and disgust. Her reputation was ruined, her social standing destroyed. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the threat of legal action, Karen had no choice but to resign from her position as HOA president. She submitted her resignation letter to the board, offering a terse apology for her mistakes and vowing to cooperate with the authorities. But her apology rang hollow. No one believed that she was truly sorry for what she had done. They saw her as a selfish and corrupt individual who had betrayed their trust and stolen their money. With Karen gone, Willow Creek Estates began the process of rebuilding. A new HOA board was elected, committed to transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership. They implemented new financial controls, ensuring that no one person could ever abuse their power again. The community also began to heal. Neighbors who had been divided by Karen's divisive leadership started to come together, working to create a more inclusive and harmonious environment. As for Karen, she retreated into seclusion, rarely venturing out of her house. She became a pariah in Willow Creek Estates, shunned by her former friends and neighbors. Her once pristine lawn became overgrown, her windows grimy, her house a reflection of her own inner turmoil. The story of Karen's downfall served as a cautionary tale for the entire community. It was a reminder that power corrupts, and that no one is above the law. It was also a testament to the power of ordinary citizens to stand up for what is right and to hold their leaders accountable. Ben and Maria, once just ordinary neighbors, had become heroes, inspiring others to get involved and make a difference in their community. They had shown that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to achieve justice and to create a better world. The ordeal had been a long one, but Karen's forced resignation was a turning point for Willow Creek Estates. The weeks following Karen's resignation were a whirlwind for Ben. Everywhere he went in Willow Creek Estates, neighbors stopped him to offer their thanks and congratulations. They praised his courage, his dedication, and his unwavering commitment to justice. "You're a hero, Ben," Mr. Johnson said, clapping him on the back. "You stood up to Karen when no one else would. You saved us all a lot of money." "We're so grateful for what you did," Mrs. Davis added, giving him a warm hug. "You've made this community a better place." Even neighbors who had once been skeptical of Ben, who had seen him as an outsider, now embraced him as one of their own. They recognized that he had acted not out of self-interest but out of a genuine desire to protect and improve their community. Ben was humbled by the outpouring of support. He had never sought to be a hero, but he was proud of what he had accomplished. He had stood up for what was right, and he had made a difference in the lives of his neighbors. He received invitations to barbecues, potlucks, and neighborhood gatherings. People wanted to get to know him, to hear his story, and to express their appreciation. Maria, too, was hailed as a hero. Her wisdom, her guidance, and her unwavering support had been instrumental in Ben's success. She had been the voice of reason, the steady hand that had guided him through the turbulent waters of HOA politics. Together, Ben and Maria had become a symbol of hope and change in Willow Creek Estates. They had shown that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they work together and stand up for what they believe in. The keying and egging of Ben's car was now a distant memory. It had been a painful and frustrating experience, but it had ultimately led to something positive. It had sparked a chain of events that had transformed Willow Creek Estates from a community ruled by fear and corruption into a community based on trust, transparency, and justice. Ben's drum kit was getting a lot more use these days, with impromptu neighborhood jam sessions becoming a regular thing. Even better, the HOA agreed to pay for the damage to his car. Ben smiled. It was good to be home. As the dust settled and life in Willow Creek Estates returned to a new normal, Ben had time to reflect on everything that had happened. He thought about the initial anger he had felt when he discovered the damage to his car, the frustration he had experienced while sifting through the HOA records, and the fear he had felt when confronting Karen at the meeting. He realized that the entire experience had been a valuable lesson in the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. He had learned that even one person can make a difference, that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they work together and stand up for their beliefs. He also realized that it's important to be patient and persistent, to gather the facts, and to approach problems in a calm and rational manner. He could have easily given in to his anger and retaliated against Karen, but he knew that would have only made things worse. Instead, he had chosen to follow Maria's advice and to seek justice through the proper channels. He thought about Karen, and he felt a pang of sympathy for her. She had made some terrible choices, and she had paid a heavy price for her actions. He hoped that she would learn from her mistakes and that she would eventually find a way to make amends. But most of all, he was grateful for the support of his neighbors, especially Maria. She had been his rock throughout the entire ordeal, providing him with guidance, encouragement, and friendship. He knew that he could not have done it without her. He looked out at his new car, shining red in the sun. The scratch was gone, a distant memory. He smiled. He had learned a lot about himself, about his neighbors, and about the importance of community. And he knew that he was finally home, not just in his house, but in his heart. It was a new beginning. The beat of the drums was calling him. Willow Creek Estates experienced a renaissance. The new HOA was committed to transparency and open communication. Meetings were now collaborative and productive, with all members having a voice. The budget was readily available, and all expenses were carefully scrutinized. The oppressive atmosphere that had once permeated the community had lifted, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. Neighbors who had previously kept to themselves now organized block parties, picnics, and volunteer events. Ben found himself making new friends, people who appreciated his honesty, his courage, and his willingness to stand up for what was right. He joined a book club, a hiking group, and even a volunteer gardening team that helped maintain the community's green spaces. He and Maria became close friends, spending hours chatting on their porches, sharing stories, and laughing together. They had forged a bond that would last a lifetime. Ben also started giving drum lessons to some of the neighborhood kids. The sound of music filled the air, replacing the tension and negativity that had once dominated Willow Creek Estates. Even Ben's bright red sports car became a symbol of hope and change, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to achieve justice and to create a better world. He even let some of the kids sit in it, supervised, of course, and make vroom vroom noises. The story of Willow Creek Estates became a local legend, a testament to the power of community and the importance of standing up for what is right. And it all started with a young homeowner, a keyed car, and a determination to seek justice. The beat goes on, and the community thrives. The end.